Thank you for inviting me to participate tonight. It's such an honor to be here representing Northrop Grumman. I believe it is vital that we sponsor events like this to honor and recognize the effort and sacrifice of all those who supported the Apollo missions. First, I would like to thank those with us tonight, the 3 Apollo astronauts, our Kennedy Space Center director, elected officials, LEM 5 retirees, and guests for the 50th anniversary celebration. But I also want to recognize the organizing committee for this event tonight. So if you are either on the committee or a volunteer, if you would stand up, please. I know a lot of hours went into organizing this event. Also, I'd ask, if you worked on Apollo, would you please stand up? And finally, if you were married to someone, or your father or mother worked on Apollo, you were part of making it happen too. So if you would stand up, just stand up. On this very day, 50 years ago, at 4:18 this afternoon, the world watched and held their breath as Eagle landed on the moon. And at 10:58 tonight, 50 years ago, that evening, Neil Armstrong made the first steps on the moon. I'm sure that everyone can remember exactly where they were. The people in this room made it possible. Tonight, we thank the employees who worked on the Apollo program, the astronauts, NASA, and Grumman. What occurred 50 years ago is the greatest accomplishment of mankind.
Amen.
To go from the Earth to another celestial body and return safely. It was the biggest moment on the planet in 1969. It unified us as a nation. And it proved the test of time, remembering one of the most significant achievements for our country and for our company. NASA trailblazed an incredible challenge, and companies like Grumman took on a nearly impossible task. We designed and built a spacecraft that had never been flown and could not be flown prior to the mission. There were no second chances. It had to get right the first time. But 50 years later, let's try to imagine the challenge. After contract award in the late 1962 to Grumman, you need to design, build, test, do final assembly, and launch an aircraft in 6 years. Anyone who works in aerospace and defense today knows that's a challenge. And something no one had ever done before. But let's look at it a little closer. You don't know if the lunar surface has an inch of dust or it has 2 feet of dust. You need to design it, not with computers, but slide rules to 3 significant digits.
3 digits.
You don't have computers, you don't have finite element analysis, you don't have computational fluid dynamics. Now you have a flight control computer, your guidance computer, that has 2K of RAM and 38K of ROM. So your smartphone today that you probably have in your pocket is 1,000,000 times more powerful. And now you need to invent new materials. And you've got to keep the LEM to 11,000 pounds empty. And you need to design all your test facilities, you need to design all your office facilities, and oh, by the way, you need to hire about 9,000 people and train them and educate them. But think of the enormity of the task and the statistics. A Saturn V, three-stage vehicle, weighing 6.5 million pounds, with 7.5 million pounds of thrust, to lift what eventually was a 38,000 pound lunar module, 11,000 pounds empty, to the moon. So that's a 600 to 1 ratio. So every pound made a difference on the lunar module, plus its reliability. In the end, the LEM was the most reliable part of the Apollo Saturn space vehicle. And it remains the only manned vehicle to land anywhere beyond Earth. The Apollo astronauts who are here with us today bravely stepped forward and placed their lives on the line, trusting the men and women who created these launch vehicles to get them to the moon and home safely. Apollo 13 proved testament to how well those vehicles would work. The astronauts who are here tonight, Jack Swikert, Fred Hayes, and Jack Harrison Schmidt, are three of the ones who made this possible through the successive missions of Apollo. Their technical expertise, flight test knowledge, and leadership were paramount to the program succeeding. And I know we're all looking forward to hearing from them later on to share some of their experiences. So a little bit about me. I grew up on Long Island, and I was 12 when that lunar landing took place. We were all drawn to the space program. Every news day that I delivered provided progress on Grumman's lunar landing program and the 9,000 people who were working on it. Fortunately, when I joined Grumman in 1974, I got to know many of the team that worked on the LEM. I just wanted to mention a couple of them. Tom Kelly, who was the chief engineer, displayed the lunar module at math fairs and talked about the mission and interviewed me for a Grumman scholarship. I would see Tom and his family in church at Christmas, and if you read Tom's book, How We Built the Lunar Lander, and knew him, you saw a different side of what you might have thought was a very technical Tom Kelly. He speaks about the personal characteristics of his colleagues, what they looked like, how they acted, and how he built a professional team. Also, many people think that Tom's book is the best book on systems engineering ever written. For the most challenging assignment. Simply put, landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. Joe Gavin, who was the Lunar Module Program Manager, interviewed me in high school for MIT. Joe explained that every failure during tests needed to be understood for root cause and correction. And later asked, when he, and I believe he had almost 50 years with Grumman, became the president, when he was asked what the highlight of his career was, he said it was when the Apollo 13 astronauts returned to Grumman and publicly thanked them for providing that reliable lunar module lifeboat that you opened. I met Neil Armstrong on a total eclipse cruise to Africa as a high school student. He was polite enough to answer my questions about whether to study astronomy or aerospace engineering and where to go to school. I also got to know Arnold Whitaker, who was the Lunar Module GNC lead, and many of the Lunar Module employees on the X-29. And I know Mr. Cabana flew our X-29 and had something like 400 successful flights, so thank you, sir. X-29 was a highly unstable aircraft, and they recalled, when working with them, what it was like to work on the lunar module, sleeping on cots next to their desks, solving problems even on something that was already built. For example, there was a fuel cell that was already built, a sphere, and they were worried about fuel slosh. Somebody had walked in that day with an umbrella from the rain. They said, wait a second, if you put an umbrella in, kind of open it up, that will stop the slosh. And those challenges occurred probably every day on the program here at the Kennedy Space Center with the team that did the large-scale integration, ground test, and launch. So thank you all. I also sat next to George Skurla, who was the Grumman Kennedy Space Center Operations Director at the luncheon, and was just a sponge. He shared his experience on leading people and solving issues here at the Cape. So what I want to say is all of you have been role models to us, showing the commitment to excellence, along with the astronauts and NASA personnel that you were teamed with. Now, Grumman's story didn't end with the lunar module. Grumman later assisted Rockwell in designing the space shuttle, built the space shuttle wings, supported the space station, and Northrop Grumman built a craft that actually discovered water on the moon. Today, we're currently working on over, if you go to the website, 160 different programs in space, transportation systems, satellites, and different technologies. Names like James Webb Space Telescope, Cygnus, Antares, Omega, they're all there. And we're looking forward to being part of returning to the moon and beyond. So I've admired the team that worked on the Apollo program my entire career. You were part of something special and enduring. Some of our retirees this week, with the anniversary, visited our Melbourne facility. It was great to see the younger engineers engaging very intently with our retirees and them with them. And the retirees just perfectly on their game, knew their systems, could call out the weights, the flow rates, unbelievable. Your story is fascinating today as it was 50 years ago. So on this 50th anniversary of the lunar landing, to all the astronauts, NASA employees, and LEM 5 retirees, our sincere gratitude for accomplishing the most historic mission of mankind. Thank you.
Now Bob Lees has been asked to present him with a tribute from Mr. Randy Fine, State Representative who couldn't be with us this evening. And the tribute is to acknowledge the accomplishments of Northrop Grumman in landing a man on the moon and bringing him back safely. Thank you, Bob. At this time, I'd like to address your attention